네, 안녕하세요.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the cruise session of the 17th World Ocean Forum. I'm Park Se-won. Korea has been making huge efforts into developing the cruise industry. With increasing popularity and awareness of the so-called K-culture, we are at a crossroads in developing our Korea cruise future industry. So in this session of cruise, we are going to talk about home port strategy, moving away from port of calls, and we're going to talk about K-cruise roles and strategies. Then please welcome the chair of the session, Dr. Yoon-ju of Korea Culture and Tourism Institute. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. Good afternoon. Just as introduced, I'm Yoon-ju of Korea Culture and Tourism Institute. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be here. I understand that you just had a meal, so you might feel a little drowsy. During this session, the theme of this session is cruise. And as we celebrate the 17th World Ocean Forum, well, actually, the cruise session started back in 2015, and this has been just 3 years. So 3 years ago, if you think of that time, well, it was when the pandemic hit the world. And I'm glad that we have the separate session for cruise for the last couple of years, starting from 2015. And since 2016, cruise has led to lots of institutionalizations, and also we have been working on developing the industry with many systems. So we have seen huge growth in this industry. I believe that we are at a crucial point. Well, the moderator mentioned the K-culture. So in the past, we wanted to make sure that we serve as major port of calls, but in the long run, we thought that we can think of some home port strategies. So we call it the K-cruise home port strategy, and we're going to talk about how we can become a home port going forward. We have 2 presentations and panelists representing terminals and industries. And regarding our presentations, we have one presenter from Korea and the other one from overseas country. First, we are going to have Professor Shim of Kyonggi University. And quick introduction to him. He served as the senior VP at Hyundai Asan Corporation for many years, and he left Hyundai Group to become a professor of Kyonggi University, and he's been involved in this cruise-related industry. And when he served as a VP at Hyundai Asan Corporation, he was involved in the Kyonggi Cruise, Kumgang Cruise project, so he is well-versed in the cruise business, and he is going to give us a talk on the theme of K-cruise home port strategy.
잘 들리시죠?
Do you hear me okay?
Shim. Actually, I prepared the presentation in English, but I noticed most of the audience are Koreans, over 95%. So I discussed with the chairwoman, the Dr. Yoon. So I'd better speak in Korean, not in English. So sorry for the foreign participants from the abroad. but you will not have any problem. We have such a capable interpreter simultaneously, so you will not have any language barriers. So please allow me, from now on, let me talk in Korean. Thank you. 지금부터 지금
Just as I introduced, I prepared my presentations in English, but we have many Korean participants in the audience, so why don't I give this presentation in Korean? So the topic of my talk is K-Cruise Homeport Strategy, and this is the table of contents. What is a cruise homeport? So it's basically clarifying the term. And in order to become a cruise homeport, what would be the selection criteria? And I'm going to look at the K-Cruise reality. I'm going to take a very critical view of the reality of K-Cruise, and I'm going to look at Japan and China's cruise policy, followed by closing remarks. I have more than 100 pages for my PPT, so I'll rush through my slides. First, about K-Cruise. So when I heard that the title of the session was K-Cruise, there were many things that went over my mind. So K-drama, K-comics, K-cosmetics. Well, you can basically add the alphabet K to anything so that it can be popular with many people around the world. So if you think about the current state of K-Cruise, adding this alphabet, adding this letter K, well, we don't really want to undermine the reputation of the Korean culture. I don't think I have to highlight this point once again because we have so many industries or sectors that has the letter K in front of everything. And in the classical contests, you can see that many Korean players and participants are winning awards. So there is this Belgian film director who created a documentary film on K-film. So we have this K-Pungnu, or K-appreciation for the arts. And also, in bodybuilding, we see many Korean bodybuilders are winning the prizes. And now we're expanding it to be K-defense industry and talking about whether we can become the top 4. We keep talking about this cruise homeport, so I want to clarify this term first. When it comes to this cruise, you can see that there are many definitions, and this table can be very valuable for us. We have, when it comes to port functions, we have the so-called home port, port of calls, and hybrid types as well. So when it comes to cruise, what would be the criteria that selects a home port? So if it's a home port, then you board the vessel in Busan and takes your cruise, and it has to be a liner to be a home port, to constitute a home port. And in entering and exiting the port, we need facilities to qualify as a home port. And we are well equipped with these facilities. And another crucial part is accessibility. So it has to be convenient, and you have to have transportation, whether it be railroad, taxi, air, and trains. So if you think about Miami, Barcelona, or Singapore, these are the ports equipped with all this infrastructure. And in order to be an operational hub, the home port is an operational hub for the cruise line, where the ship is serviced, restocked, and prepared for upcoming cruises. So basically, that's preparation for the next cruise operations. And if you think about major cruise harbors, they're located in easily accessible locations in major cities. But it doesn't have to be a major city. If you have very good natural, scenic environment, for instance, you can think of the Bahamas, Cancun, Casablanca, Bali, and so on. And also you can think of ports in scenic natural areas. So if you have good enough views, then passengers would love it. So Alaska, Norwegian fjords, Milford Sound in New Zealand, these are the examples of ports in scenic natural areas. And there are ports near cultural and historical sites, for instance, in Athens. Well, the cruise port facility itself is not very good or top-notch, but with the name Athens, it is attractive enough. So today we are talking about a home port strategy. So Jeju, Busan, and Incheon of Korea, what kind of home port strategies do we pursue? So one example can be, this is what's located in Shanghai. Accessibility is great. And this is the Usongku terminal, which has the best infrastructure in Asia. And it had the investment of $150 million in 2015, and the investment is being made constantly. And this is the case of Singapore. So this is the Marina Bay Sands, and in the swimming pool, I took this picture myself with just a regular camera. This shows how close this is to the port. And the bus, regular bus, can go to the cruise terminal. And once the passenger gets off the bus and loads the luggage, then this can be taken right onto the ship. And it only has 2.5 million population, and in order to qualify as a home port, we need to have a huge market. So what Singapore did was fly and cruise. So at Heathrow, London, you can check your baggage. And in regular cases, you might think you have to get your luggage at Changi Airport. But in this case of this cruise terminal in Singapore, that is directly delivered to the cabin room of the cruise ship. And when I had an interview with public servants, what they do, according to them, was making sure that customs clearance is done swiftly so that passengers can pay more money. And that they believe that that's the reason why they exist and that why they're working for the government. This is the case of the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. It used to be an airport, and the runway of 3.5 kilometers are now, this is being used for the cruise terminal. And on the right-hand side, it says, "We're grateful for the support we have received from the Hong Kong government, authorities, and trade partners." What that means is, well, this is what Genting Dream Cruise staff members said. And what that meant was the cruise line was grateful for the support it got from the government. This is a Nassau cruise port in the Bahamas. If you look at the color of the sea, you might think this is worth of your investment. Cozumel is in Mexico. And this one, Grand Cruise Terminal in Qatar. This is the most beautiful cruise terminal, with more than 1,500 arches, and this is equipped with all kinds of cultural facilities. What's astonishing is that it takes only 10 minutes to see the most beautiful museum in the world, the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. What's even more amazing is With another 5 minutes, you can reach the National Museum of Qatar. And this building was constructed by Hyundai Construction. So the place is well equipped with the infrastructure. You have this terminal that is closely connected to the bazaar and museums nearby within 5 or 10 minutes. And if you look at Athens, the facility itself is not very good, but the brand name Athens is good enough. This is Canada, Vancouver. This is the conventions hall. You can see the flags. So just like the exhibition convention of Korea, throughout the year we have lots of conventions. And this one, Miami Cruise Terminal. Let me just skip. We have great expressways, but we did have congestions, so we have these underwater tunnels that we worked on. So now passengers can drive their vehicles, park their cars, even though they have highways. They use these underwater tunnels. Then regarding the type of home port that we want to be, well, basically we are competing against all kinds of cruise terminals that I just show you now. So what we are thinking of is, well, we have this great North Port, and we're wondering why this is not being recognized as a home port. To be a cruise home port, it really depends on the cruise line or the specific cruise package and the preference of travelers. So, well, let's say that we created a cruise home port, but that doesn't mean that cruise lines will recognize them as home ports. Passengers will determine which will serve as a home port, and this will be received by the cruise lines according to the preference of passengers. So we have to take the perspective of shipping companies and passengers and put ourselves in their shoes. We have to think about the viewpoints of the cruise lines and passengers. We shouldn't think about it from the perspective of ours. So the key word is cruise lines and passengers, and we have to put ourselves in their shoes so that we can create the right cruise home port that we want to see. And when we create a cruise home port, we have to think if it's politically feasible. Well, look at the case of Israel. And also we have to think about the policy and financial support. For instance, at the government level, in this case, it's the city of Busan. What kind of financial support can we turn to? And cruise lines should be able to make money. So with Busan playing as a home port, will it make money? And what about market accessibility? There are many factors that we need to consider. And also, we have to understand how much consensus we managed to build. For instance, with Busan people, Busan citizens. So do they have a welcoming mind to cruise passengers, or do they see them as those who just throw out trash and generate waste? And then we have to think about policy consistency. When we had a cruise route to Mount Kumgang in North Korea, well, we started the journey from the East Sea, and suddenly we're talking about starting the journey from the port of Busan. And by taking another route, then we have to run more than 10 hours to meet the time schedule. So we have to factor in all these political conditions. So factoring in all these conditions, we can come up with this selection criteria. We have to qualify all these conditions to be selected as a home port. So like I said, local perception matters. And second one, geography, proximity of social markets, and when Busan becomes the home port, how many passengers can we accommodate? And next one, we have to do the cost comparison. How cost competitive can we be? And berth allocation is crucial as well. So when Busan serves as a home port, 6 months before, we have to do the allocation of berths. And what kind of systems will we do? Well, if you visit the website of Miami, you can basically berth anywhere you want, because they have vacancies and available berths anytime, basically. But take the example of Jeju Island. This is from Hala Daily. When it comes to berth allocation system, well, Jeju Island can serve as the hybrid type port, and it is allocating berths to cruise lines that have many international routes. But when it comes to those cruise lines that visit these local communities more than 30 times, and if they consume locally produced water, or if they have the performance of hiring youths that graduated from youth academy, and those who the cruise companies, the cruise lines that cooperated for more than 5 times. Well, these are the criteria. And these can be very vague. You might think that you can meet all these criteria, but will this be acceptable to foreign cruise lines? And there are many other port infrastructure. And also we have to think about comfort of cruise passengers. Well, I actually boarded cruise ships at Port of Busan, and it's not always easy to go there on foot. So when I try to take a cab, drivers would sometimes reject that. So when I get off the Busan train station, I'm always nervous because I might get rejected once again by a cab driver. So you might think that you can take the airplane, but congestions at Jeju Airport and Gimhae Airport, this is not a viable option. And another thing is the shoreside electricity. So when you're berthing, you want to keep the main engine at the lowest possible rate and use the shoreside electricity. So 40% of the cruise ships are ready to be provided with shoreside electricity, and there will be 30% additional cruise lines that will be retrofitted. So it's not only convenient, but it will help us to reduce emissions, and we can decrease 99% of SOx by doing so. So we looked at what we've been doing at the government level to develop Korean cruise industry. But at the moment, well, cruise industry is not fully mature to add this letter K, to deserve this letter K. In 1998, a Korean conglomerate, Hyundai, bought the ferry boat to launch a Kumgang cruise route. But it recorded 80 billion loss and continued to lose 7 billion won per month in 2002. And then North-South overland tourism began in 2003, so cruise industry declined since that time. So the next one is not quite a cruise business, but it was a car ferry business, and that was another failure case. And this was a joint venture which started with a big size, but it also suffered a huge deficit, and it went out of business within a year. So given these inferior conditions, well, if some companies are interested in a cruise business, then the government would welcome their approach, because the Korean government is interested in developing the cruise industry, which is suffering a lot at the moment. For the air business to take root, for Korean Air and Asiana, there have been huge support from the government. And that's exactly what we need for the cruise business, so that it can further grow based on funding and budgets. And currently, we do have issues with funding and budgets. Currently, I'm not specifically talking about departments of governments or specific companies, but as a person in this industry, I sincerely hope that we can see future growth of the Korean cruise industry. So when I talked about the definition of the Korean home port, well, we do not have good understanding of what that means at the media level and at the government level. So this is the media coverage in 2012 in December. It talks about how Busan Port has emerged as a hub for cruise tourism in Northeast Asia. And the next one, Sokcho Port, aims to become Northeast Asia cruise hub. And the next one, I intentionally blocked his photo. Oceans and Fisheries Minister, the then minister, said that Korea will launch at least 5 national flag cruise ships, but that didn't happen yet. When the Chinese government has an announcement, then it's done. But this is nothing that was done, even though this was mentioned by the Oceans Minister. And the minister said that it's a 1 trillion won market. And given the number of passengers, which is about 50,000, that means that one person has to spend $2,000. So that's just a sense check. I'm not trying to be critical, but thinking about the number of population in Korea, which is about 51 million, there's only 0.093% of Korean people who actually boarded the cruise ships. What that means is the outbound cruise tourism, well, more than 50% of the Korean people, they go to foreign countries, and we have a huge outbound tourism market. And in Taiwan, given the cruise market and the number of population, we see that the cruise market for Taiwan is 6 times bigger. In other words, we have the market of only 1/16 of the market compared to Taiwan's. So what the government is doing is that you can pay only $100 to take a cruise tour. So it's not like the government is not doing anything. And the government announced the Cruise Promotion Act in 2013 and has lots of plans to promote this industry. Well, regarding the budget, securing the budget and allocating the budget, there are no provisions on how to secure the budget and how it will be allocated. We have good plans, but budgets are not secured. So if you look at the 2023 major work implementation plan, you can see that there is about 136 billion won that is allocated, but this is not including cruise. So we have good plans, but there's no plan. And without a budget, we cannot produce any outcome. So introducing a home port can be a very competitive war, and you need to have bullets to fight a war. If you look at China and Japan, they have lots of bullets, but we only have 2. So this is the total budget statement that is more than 500 pages. And for cruise, we have the budget of 800 million won. But if you look at the budget for the Ministry of Sports and Culture, it's more than 1 trillion won. Then we can see that the budget for cruise is only 0.079%, and this shows how much of that budget is allocated. And this is not really practical to do any job. So you see that the term cruise comes up more than 7 times. And this is the budget for the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. And this 1.3 trillion won includes funds for tourism. But we're talking about 800 million won to promote the cruise industry. So we were interested in how the Ministry of Culture and Sports were able to secure 1 trillion won. And from the Ministries of Fisheries, well, these are where the budget is executed. And you can see that 2.6 billion won is secured for ocean environment international cooperation. And there are so many old vessels that need to be replaced, and there are so many areas where this money has to be spent, including the Fukushima wastewater. And also we have to do the customer satisfaction survey, which takes up a huge portion of the budget as well. We have this old saying that generosity can only come when the storehouse is full. So these are the budgets. And we're looking at the case of Japan to compare the budgets. So they have more than 1,000 times cruise budget in Japan. And the last one support regional economic development through enhanced cooperation with related industries. This resonates with us. It's not the government alone, but it has to work with the cruise industry, keeps talking with it so that it can become a cruise home port. And it has to constantly work with cruise lines. So this is not something I have created, but I borrowed this phrase from what they have. So across Japan, it plans to promote these international cruise ports. And also, it considers how it can rival cruise ports in the Caribbean and other major port areas. In order to be a home port, we have to keep asking how we can become a home port. customs clearance, tax benefits, the infrastructure. These are something that we need going forward, and that's what Japan and China are doing in terms of their policies. And thanks to these efforts, they're becoming the growing cruise powerhouses. So I believe that we are clear with future directions, looking at the cases of Japan and China. So China is financially supporting cruise lines so that the ship can be launched as soon as possible. So when a cruise line builds a company in Shanghai, 50% of the finance comes from it is supported by the government. And it is aiming to make sure that it can accommodate passengers in Shanghai, and 2 vessels are already completed. And it is trying to accommodate foreign cruise lines that are headquartered in Shanghai. And actually, more than 57 billion won was spent by Chinese passengers. So cruise is recognized as a high-tech industry that can lead to huge consumption. But in Korea, we do not have any statistical data. And it was very difficult for me to have such data. Maybe the Fisheries Ministry might have such relevant data, or maybe we can get it from the Asian Cruise Society. But anyway, we need close cooperation with relevant agencies, including the Fisheries Ministry, and we believe that we need some converged entity, maybe under the Ministry of Prime Minister's office. So first we have to think about the market, and we have to make sure cruise lines are profitable, making money so that we can enjoy the ripple effects of these business activities. But without the budget, like I highlighted, we cannot do anything. So we are only depending on the money, but we have to move away from the government-led initiatives, and everyone in this room has to work together to promote cruise. That requires governance. Well, like I said, the air industry took root thanks to the support by the government. So until we see that in the cruise industry, the role of the government and relevant organizations is crucial. And the remainder of the slides, in the interest of time, will be skipped. For Samsung Electronics and Hyundai, for the last 50 years, they made constant investments doing what they do. It's an absolute necessity to have a home port so that we can create jobs and drive future economic growth. And with the north route that is connected, this can serve as a bridge for international trade. So I hope that everyone in this room spares no efforts. It can be a local player and any small player. And if you're interested in starting a small car ferry, for instance, I believe that we have to provide our full support. I believe I spent more than 30 minutes. Even though I have so much to say, let me just conclude my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Shim. He was involved in the industry and academia at the same time, so he had a lot to talk about the function and the role of a home port. Thank you very much for your passionate presentation.